Welcome everyone to the Malvern Retreat House. We're going to take a look at the Gospel from this past Sunday, and tomorrow we'll take a look at it as well, but today we're just going to explain it, and then tomorrow I'll offer some ways that we can apply it to our lives. So a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he had sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be conformed to it. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. This past Sunday was the Feast of All Saints. And on that feast day, we always read the Beatitudes from Matthew's Gospel. And they contain the values that the saints in heaven lived by in their lives. So let's take a look at the Beatitudes. Matthew wrote his Gospel and based it on 5 great sermons or discourses that Jesus gave in his lifetime. The first one is called the Sermon on the Mount. It's the longest and the most important of these 5 discourses. And the Beatitudes are the very beginning of that discourse. So they're super, super important. So let's jump into them. There are 2 versions of the Beatitudes. One version is in Matthew, which is what we just heard, but there's also a version in St. Luke. St. John doesn't have them, and St. Mark don't have them. So, in some ways, they're very, very different from each other. St. Matthew has 8 Beatitudes. St. Luke only has 4. And then St. Luke also has a woe or a curse for each one of those 4, whereas Matthew doesn't have that at all. It's all 8 Beatitudes. Matthew has a very, very serious beginning to the Beatitudes. So this is what happens. We're told that Jesus sees the crowd. That's the first thing. Then he went up on a mountainside. Ooh. Then he sits down. Okay. Next one, his disciples come to him. And then the 5th thing is now he begins to teach them. This is very, very deliberate on St. Matthew's account. Luke has a completely different beginning. So, what's Matthew doing here? Well, there's a couple of things. These 5 actions are exactly what Moses did in the Old Testament. So at a certain point in the Old Testament, Moses sees a huge crowd. He goes up to Mount Sinai. Then he sits down because Jewish rabbis, whenever they taught, always sat down. Wisdom figures always sat down. That's what Moses does. His disciples come to him, and then Moses begins teaching. He gives the law to the Jewish people. Well, Matthew is saying that's exactly what's happening here with Jesus. So Jesus is a new Moses. Jesus has his disciples. This mountain is a new Mount Sinai. Jesus is going to give the new law that's going to supersede the old law of the Old Testament. So very, very solemn beginning. Now, these Beatitudes are a way of teaching that's kind of based on the way wisdom figures taught in the Old Testament. Okay, so there's two parts to each Beatitude. There's a present condition, a condition of humiliation or sorrow or poverty. And then there's a future component. There's going to be something great that's going to happen to that person in the future. This happens, for example, in the Psalms. The very first Psalm is a beatitude. Happy are those who walk not in the counsel of the wicked, and who do not sit with them, but instead who walk with God. So it's a way of teaching. In the gospel that we just heard, there are two sets of beatitudes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fourth beatitude is for the sake of righteousness. So that's going to be a very important distinction. The first four end for the sake of righteousness, because righteousness is a super important theme in Matthew's gospel. Then the second half of the Beatitudes, 5, 6, 7, and 8, they're introduced. And the eighth Beatitude ends for the sake of righteousness. So that's the inner structure of the Beatitudes. 4 Beatitudes, and then 4 Beatitudes. Now, there is a 9th blessed, but it's really not a separate beatitude. It's really the 8th beatitude, but now Jesus isn't just talking to everybody in the crowd. It's almost like Jesus looks right into the camera like I'm doing, and Jesus says, "And blessed are you when you are persecuted." He had already said it in the 8th beatitude, but now Jesus speaks it directly to his disciples. And he even goes so far as to say, rejoice, and in case you miss it, be glad that you're being persecuted for my sake, because your reward will be great in heaven. Now, as I said at the beginning, the Beatitudes are values that Jesus wants his followers to live according to in their lives and in their discipleship. There's 8 of them mentioned. What's super, super important is to remember that Jesus practiced these himself. The Beatitudes are really autobiographical, that these are the values that Jesus lived by. And Jesus never asked anyone else to do something or to live according to values that he himself didn't do or live according to. So the Beatitudes are the values Jesus lived by and that he encourages his disciples to live by as well. And we read them today because as his disciples, the saints in heaven, lived these out. So they're really a wonderful kind of summary of Jesus' teaching. And tomorrow we're going to dive into each one of the Beatitudes, learn about it, and then figure out how we can, live it out in our lives. Thanks everyone, and God bless you.